certainly great to see you guys and playing in postseason. Our football team is really excited to play in the Nova Home Loan Arizona Bowl. I made a statement earlier, and every colleague that I have talked to that has participated in this current game has had glowing, recommendations and experiences. So our football team is really excited about that. Football coaches typically are not great multitaskers, but we've been doing a lot of that between recruiting and now we're in full bowl game preparations. We do have a signing date come Wednesday, and we'll have a short press conference there. It probably won't be as extensive as what the old days were, but that's coming up on Wednesday. So hopefully we'll see some of the same people here on Wednesday as well. A couple notes, Cooper Roth has been invited to the East-West Shrine game, so we're certainly excited about that. Cooper's an excellent place kicker and now has turned into the all-time leading scorer at the University of Wyoming. Logan Wilson continues to bring in some individual honors. I saw today, I believe he was third team by the AP. That's you AP guys. I would put him on first team, but that's the media. I'm being a little bit sarcastic there. Nobody laughed. Thank you.
I thought it was funny.
Thanks, appreciate it. But it's great to see him get that recognition. And Logan is an unselfish player, and he hails from the state of Wyoming. He's worked really hard, and he's played really well. Another note, unfortunately, Javari Jackson will be suspended from the football team, and he will have no football activities. And there'll be no more comments other than that's violation of team rules. As I said earlier, signing date's Wednesday, so we're looking forward to that. And we are deep into bowl preparations right now. Our opponent, Georgia State, an excellent football team, a 7-win football team that there's some common threads there with us. I mean, they beat Tennessee, an SEC opponent, at the beginning of the year. We have one common opponent, which is Texas State. They lost to them in triple overtime, so they had a close game. And if you remember our game with Texas State, it was fairly close as well. Well, I don't know Coach Elliott. I do know the coaching tree that he's from. He was an App State guy and worked with Jerry Moore, and also spent time at South Carolina. So from afar, a great deal of respect for what they've done at Georgia State. I think in a short amount of time, they're a really competitive football program, and they're from a part of the country that has been blessed to have a lot of good athletes, and that's apparent with what we see on tape. If you start out right away, their quarterback, Ellington is we think, an excellent senior quarterback. He's got good size. They're balanced on offense, and that always poses problems on defense. They can run the football against most all their opponents, and then they throw the ball well. And so, that's going to pose a challenge for us as we get ready. They do run a 3-4 defense, and, that's always a little bit of a change of pace for us because we're a 4-down team, and typically you kind of gravitate to the teams that, your team that you go against all the time in practice. With 4-down linemen, 3-down linemen's a little bit different. So we're going to need some preparation. However, we've faced a lot of 3-4 teams during the course of this year, some more successful times than others. But we're certainly excited about this ball game on the 31st. I know there's been a great outpouring of interest on our fans' part, and I think a lot of it is we've got a good football team. We've got an excellent opponent. We've got a great game time, the 31st, and we've got a great location in Tucson. So we're excited about that. So at this time, questions from anybody in the media? Yes, David.
Just to be clear, Javari, is he out for the game, for the bowl game?
Yes, and made longer. Right now he's suspended, and to use the term indefinite until some things get resolved, he's suspended. Okay? Other questions?
How else is the health of the team in terms of guys that you may or may not have right now? Coach, do you know?
One guy that's kind of on the bubble, Titus Swain, has been practicing. And so he's actually out of town right now. He's doing a citizenship test, which is big for him and his family. So we are certainly supportive of that. He will be returning shortly. But he did practice. Was not a full contact practice, but he did practice on Saturday, so we're encouraged about that. And we'll see how he progresses, but we're optimistic that he'll be cleared to play.
When do you expect him back?
From Dallas,
Yeah.
Wednesday. That's when we've been told the flight's coming back.
And how many practices do you have before you're gonna break for Christmas?
We're gonna practice, we'll practice all the way up until the 22nd, and we'll have practice every day. Actually, check that we'll have a light practice on the 23rd, the morning of the 23rd. They'll be departing, and then we will have we'll convene in Tucson, and then we'll have a practice later in the afternoon, early evening on the 27th. So, you try to strike a balance, the number of practices that you have, the layoff that you have. And one thing that helped me through the years, my experience in Nebraska, we played in some of these later games, and there was quite a bit of layoff. Coach Osborne, I thought, was really good at having a formula. Some of the time that I was at my last school, we had a long layoff, and so there's a mix of what you do during the course of practice. And then also, we're going to utilize some of these practices for developmental purposes. We have a young emerging football team, and so it's an opportunity for us to get a lot of fundamental work with some of these younger guys. And so while it won't be a hit fest, we're going to have some pretty robust practices, particularly with these younger players. So we utilize all that time wisely. Yes.
We're going to ask about the quarterbacks. Do you have any sort of update on how reps might be split going forward?
Right now, they've been pretty even. And so both guys have been working with the first unit. Been good to see. What also has been really encouraging to see is the camaraderie of the group. Sean's even been at a couple practices, in crutches, but all those guys support one another. It's certainly been a real good time for Levi. He's getting more and more repetition. We had a 2-minute session on Saturday. I believe that might have been the first time he's gone through a 2-minute session. So these repetitions that he's getting in the game repetitions are invaluable for him. And we applaud Tyler. Tyler's been a competitive guy. He's going out there and sometimes a guy that's an entrenched starter, or the starter may be a little bit resentful of another guy coming in and playing some, and that's not been the case. And so we'll continue to work through with these guys. We're going to need both of them. We'll make a determination who's the starter as we go. But right now we're in the mode of trying to get better.
Do you want to have that decision made before you leave, or will you evaluate that all the way up to game?
I think we may evaluate that all the way up to game time, because both guys have been playing.
Yeah.
And so whether we choose to keep that same formula where both guys continue to play, or where one guy's going to play the lion's share, I think some of that's going to be a reflection on how we progress. Yes, Kevin.
Coach,
Tough one coming.
Does Georgia
State
remind you of any Mountain West teams or anybody that we have played?
Well, I think their skill level certainly on par with Boise State. Their wide receivers, running backs, and things like that. They deploy their guys a little bit differently. They'll operate with more of a spread look. Boise was more multi-formation, but I think you could look at the skill level, and you've got a really experienced quarterback, and he makes really good decisions. I think he's completing about 63% of his passes. He stays on the field a lot. He's fairly mobile. So we got a tall task on our defense. The encouraging thing is we have played good defense, and we'll need to play well against Georgia State on defense to give ourselves a chance to win. Other questions? Yes.
This is a little bit off topic, but I know that you know the Burrow family from your time at Nebraska, and you've known Joe since he was a little kid. Was it kind of surreal to see him holding the Heisman Trophy?
It certainly was, because Jimmy and I go back way back. I coached his oldest son, Jamie, as a linebacker, and then Jimmy was on our staff, and then he also had another son, Dan, and then Jimmy was the first defensive coordinator that I hired at NDSU, and I can remember little Joe running around on the grass practice fields with my son Aaron, and it just seemed like yesterday. And then, you know, we did track his recruiting progress. Jimmy would call us up and say, hey, can you look at my son's tape? And Deegs and I looked and said, pretty good. We're probably not going to be in position to recruit him. And of course, he went to Ohio State. And, you know, I know there was a lot of conjecture after he left whether he's going to go back to my old school, Nebraska, because Jimmy had played there. You know, all those boys played there. His mom is from a town 40 miles from Lincoln, and he ended up at LSU and had a great career, and he's played great. And so hats off to the Burrow family, and he certainly got his athleticism from his mom.
Coach, you've mentioned a couple times that you have laser-like focus to win this game. How do you balance that laser-like focus, but still allow this team to, I guess, enjoy the whole atmosphere?
Well, that's comes with a lot of experience because it needs to be an enjoyable experience. It's not a penalty trip. Some of it starts with the mentality of our football team, the culture of the football team. Our guys desperately want to win. They want to finish the year off on a high note. As much as it was frustrating, and our players were frustrated along with myself last year not being selected, I think that there's some, and we were eligible, there's some you know, added fuel to the fire that, my gosh, we're going to seize this opportunity. Our players trust us that we're going to have the right balance on practices and activities when we're down there. And a lot of that comes down to trust and communication. And I think if you have that, you have a good mentality, our players want to win. And you also recognize that this is not, it's not like you're playing in game week. You've got an extended period of time, and so how you approach each practice, and there's got to be a meaningful reason why you're practicing that day. And we have really good leadership within our football team, and so we're confident that we can accomplish both those two things, to win the game and then have it be an enjoyable trip. Yes, Davis.
How do you prepare or balance getting ready for a bowl game and then having to sign a majority of your recruiting class? I mean, with the early signing period, which is still fairly new. Like, how do you balance that being on the road, being back here,
Right,
and stuff like that?
well, some of it comes down to experience also. You know, and as I was saying earlier, football coaches, when they're really good, are not good multitaskers. Now, one of the things when you're a head coach, you're challenged with that, and to come up with a plan. I think we had a really good plan, Davis. We've done a lot of our visits prior. During the course of the season, we had in-season visits, and some schools have chosen not to do that, and we have found that's been really beneficial to have guys on campus, our game day atmosphere. And so a lot of our commitments have come from that. And then, you know, we did practice a little bit prior to that. And then, you know, we also recognize that we've gone through a long, hard-nosed season. Our last ball game, while we were disappointed we didn't win, was a very physical game. And so we utilized that time during the interim there to lift some weights and get a little bit healthier. And so our guys are focused now. Our coaches, you know, they've been rode hard and put up wet, along with myself. I mean, you're canvassing the country, landing back in town, and then walking out on the practice field, and you're doing double time, breaking down tape while you're on the road. But this is where we want to be. And I think our staff had, you know, some experience with it when we got ready for our last two bowl games. And so, you know, our guys, our coaches embraced it, and that's how we've handled it. And if you, I tell you what, if you're not going to multitask and you're not going to recruit, I know this, good players make good coaches, and you better constantly be recruiting. And so our mentality is win the game and work like heck in recruiting to make sure that we springboard off this successful year in a great bowl game.
Coach, going back to the quarterbacks, where would you say, you know, with Levi this year compared to Sean last year when you put Sean in, and where you put in Levi this year, where would you say both of their knowledge of the offense was at the time that you put them both in?
I would think pretty similar, you know, because if you look at the time of the year, I think maybe Levi came in a little bit earlier. The significant difference was Levi was here during the spring. And so the experience level as far as during the season was similar, but his foundation was significantly different in fall camp, and really was significantly different when we integrated him back into our offense. Sean had some experience during fall camp, but then he was on the scout team for all that time, where Levi had a whole spring, 15 practices, all that fall camp, so his foundation was further along. Anything else? Yes.
Obviously, you got the early signing period coming up. Roughly, how many do you expect to sign Wednesday? And is there a certain position, certain need that you still need to address?
Yeah, you're always gonna have some needs. I think we're looking at probably right around 20, 17 to 20. And if you guys have done the math, if you look at our verbal commitments right now, you can probably figure that out. And we are far enough along in our program, Davis, where unlike maybe the first couple of years where, we were just trying to write and get the right formula on how we allocated the scholarships because we had such a change schematically. We're much further along, and so, we're more methodical. Okay, 4 to 5 offensive linemen, 2 to 3 receivers, 1 quarterback, 1 or 2 running backs. We're always going to have a couple positional needs, but I think we've hit most of our baselines, and we'll know a little bit more on signing date. There's always going to be some surprises too. There'll be something good that happens that maybe you didn't anticipate, and then there's going to be something that's disappointing that you didn't anticipate. And in the end, you hit a watershed that's about right, and I think that's probably where we'll be. Yes.
I know you can't, talk specifics about the signees or the expected signees quite yet, but just kind of looking at the commitment list, I think I saw there from 8 different states. What does that kind of say about this program that you guys are able to spread so wide now?
Well, first of all, we always, I do, on that list, you'll probably notice there's somebody that's from the state of Wyoming, and that's always going to be important. And I cannot say, who he is or where he's from, but you can look through the list. But we will turn over every rock and find another Logan Wilson or Josh Arshman, and we're committed to that. And then if you look the next, we have kind of a tri-state area. If you look out and you expand, Colorado, when the Cowboys were really successful, they had a great footprint recruiting the state of Colorado. I think we've allocated a lot of resources, and it's probably indicated there. We do look in Nebraska some, and then we begin to expand out. And if you looked at when Coach Devaney was here, or Coach Eaton, I mean, at one time they joked that they called the football team the postage stamp team because guys were from all over the country. I don't know if our footprint is quite as wide. Back then they were recruited heavily on the East Coast, but we've not done that. I'm not even gonna get myself in trouble here. We've got somebody that's out there, okay, but outside of that, if you go all the way from Wisconsin through Chicago down to St. Louis, then maybe down to Houston and Dallas, and then you go out everywhere else in between, that's geographically 2/3 of the country. And when I said our coaches have been rode hard and put up wet, we have been, including me, a seasoned veteran. I mean, I would wake up not knowing what town I was in, where the rental car was at, stumbling into the next place, getting over colds and stuff like that. But I think our net is a good net, and we vetted these guys. And if we keep on putting these positive classes back to back to back, this is where more consistency is going to come. Yes, Tracy.
With all your walk-ons that you seem to have too, how big of a class do you think you'll have this year?
That's going to be, I'll probably have some conversations with some guys down at the Bulls site. If you may go, if you're talking about scholarship signings, 20, could be 25, but maybe 23 in there, 23, 24. So a good number. Yes.
Trey Smith, is his eligibility up? Could you apply for a 6-year medical hardship?
Yes, we can, and that's the plan right now. Yeah, what we've been told is it looks very favorable for him to be granted a 6th year. He's a grad transfer, so he's going to need to continue to do well in classes. But we've been told that he will have his 6th year back, and so our plan is to have him back. Yes.
Coach, I was just curious, obviously you play the game when it's scheduled to be played, but is there something to it about having a bowl game a little deeper into the season when maybe people are kind of in that college football mode rather than maybe at the start of the bowl season?
Yeah, you know what, you're right. I've listened to some of my fellow colleagues in the Mountain West, and pretty much everybody embraces when they're playing. It's been my experience that going through a long season and then having several weeks off, if it's handled right, it's more enjoyable for the players, simply because they get a chance. I mean, some of them have been going out to, playing through a lot of injuries. And so we're excited about any game we get in. Any bowl game is good. If I had my druthers, this sets in a perfect spot. I mean, for us to be playing on the 31st of December, if you're an old school guy, you're playing 31st of December or January 1. And we're playing in Arizona. Sounds good to me.
Does it help with the early signing period to have a later game?
I think it does, because it allowed us to be out pretty much the full 2 weeks. And in the past, when you have an earlier game, the challenge is preparing your team and yet continue to recruit. You want to recruit so you can keep on going to these bowl games, but you don't want to shortchange your football team in preparation. And so that's a little bit more of a challenge. I know one year we played in Boise and we had signing day, we were there. And I know one of them was one of the bowl games that was being thrown around. We'd actually be traveling on that day. So that's a little bit of a challenge. But this is ideal. And that's not a knock on any of those other bowl games. I'd be excited about them all. Okay, all right, we got some people on the phone. At this time, I'll listen to any questions that anybody on the conference call has.
Craig, this is Cody with 7220 Sports. Colorado State hired Steve Adazio this week, and he wouldn't even mention the name Wyoming. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on him and the new hires there in Fort Collins.
Well, Colorado State is obviously our rival, and while I don't know Coach Adazio, he does have a good reputation. We're in the midst of getting ready for a big bowl game, so that I'm going to leave it at that. Great question, though. No comment. Other questions on anybody on the phone lines? Well, like I said, guys, it's in the yes. Who's this? Hello?
Coach, it's Michael Lev with the Arizona Daily Star down in Tucson.
Okay, yeah, Michael, we're looking forward to spending some time with you.
Yes, I am as well. I have a handful here for you, if that's okay.
Fire away.
The first one is about Z.Z. Hearn, who played for Arizona last year. How did he end up in Wyoming, and what has he brought to your team?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been great because he was a starter for the Wildcats, and he placed his name in the transfer portal. We're very cautious about the guys that we bring into our program. Not only the guys we sign, but also transfers. And so ZZ was vetted. We knew a lot about him from high school. And we had a great experience with he and his family. And the initial thoughts when he joined our team, we felt like we needed some depth at the corner position. Certainly did not, I want to say he was not going to start, but we had a couple guys that were entrenched. And lo and behold, because of some unforeseen circumstances, he was thrust into a starting lineup, and it's been great to see him perform. He plays really hard. He's been a great team player. He's a good football player, but he's a better person, and he's really embraced the Wyoming Cowboys, and we're really pleased to have him.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about Brent Deegan, your offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, who obviously is connected to Carson Wentz at North Dakota State. He's connected to Josh Allen here at Wyoming. What do you think makes Coach Deegan such a good identifier and developer of quarterbacks?
Well, and then there's another guy that people may not know. There was a guy named Easton Stick who had committed to us when we were at NDSU, and when we left, and Brent had recruited him or evaluated him, you know, we honored, and we were not going to take a commitment away from anybody. So there are 3 quarterbacks that are in the NFL that he's evaluated, and there's 2 that are starting. And you can say a guy may be lucky when you have 2 starters as rookies in the NFL. That's not luck. I don't know what kind of odds you would put on that, but I don't think Alabama has that. Nick Saban may be as good evaluator as there is. And so a great deal of trust in Brent, you know, his skill set in picking out guys. And I think we've got a couple of really good young quarterbacks right now that are going to emerge. To say that they're going to rise to that level, I think maybe a little bit of an overstatement, but I couldn't tell you how proud that we are, and for me to have a guy like Brent on our staff with his kind of knowledge and insight is certainly special. And I think sometimes maybe people don't recognize how hard that is and what he's done. I know Josh Allen had a huge, profound effect on our program, made me a better coach, and so appreciate Brent's skill set. So good question.
One more for you. I hope I pronounced his name correctly, but where has Xavier Baladay made the most growth over the past year or so?
You've done a good job with his name there, much better than me. I'm looking forward to meeting you. You can probably give me some tips on media training.